everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we have a very special episode with our own teacher assistant, Giacomo. And we're gonna do a short interview.
Okay, so we've prepared some questions. The first one is, could you introduce yourself a bit to our viewers?
Yes, my name is Giacomo. I'm a PhD student here at the Donders Institute, and I started about a year and a half ago. I'm in my second year, and my research, I work with Marius Pelin, and my research is about visual perception, and particularly high-level visual perception. So how does the brain allow us to make sense of objects and scenes that we see every day?
What made you decide that you wanted to become a TA?
That I need credit. At TA, yeah, I mean, we as PhDs are expected to have teaching. I mean, we don't have to get teaching experience, but I think it's one of the best ways to prepare to kind of career in science, because teaching is also an integral part of academic life, and also I think it's quite fun to teach. But it's not that fun to interrogate students and give them bad grades unless you're sadistic, which I don't think I am. So that's the part that I like the least. So
Yeah, can imagine. Oh yeah, so is the experience of being a teacher assistant the way you expected it?
Well, I didn't have a lot of expectation. I think I expected it to be messy, and it turned out to be even more messy than I thought. But overall, I think it was more or less how I expected it. Yeah, I thought it would be easier, to be honest. It's hard to keep track of different things that are happening, and yeah.
And do you have any memorable moments?
Probably not the defenses.
I think the very first day was the most memorable moment, because I had very little idea of how everything worked, and it was a bit of a shock for me to have to deal with all these things at the same time, students asking questions about how many points is this worth, how many points is that worth, and I was a bit unprepared for that. So that was like the cold shower at the beginning of from there on it was more smooth.
Yeah, it turned out to be very nice in the end.
Oh, thanks.
Before coming here, what have you studied before?
So I did a bachelor's in cognitive psychology, and then I did a master's in cognitive neuroscience. So I stayed more or less on the same kind of track.
And what made you decide to come to the Netherlands?
That's so the story of how that happened. Well, I already knew the Donders, and I knew that it was a cool center and there were cool people doing nice work. But what happened was that I heard about this professor at my former university in Italy that had just gotten a grant, and so I was advised to, and he was working in things that interested me, and so I was advised to go talk to him for PhD opportunities, and so I did, and then it turns out that I'm leaving Italy. I will be moving to the Netherlands. Are you still interested? And I was like, yeah. And yeah, so that's the story of how I ended up here. I had actually, by coincidence, I had already been to Nijmegen, so I already knew that I liked the place. So yeah.
Okay, but that helps. Yeah. And okay, wait. We still have this one.
Yeah. We wanted to ask if you have any projects that you're currently working on.
Yeah, so my main project that I'm working on in the PhD is an fMRI project where I'm investigating expectations in naturalistic vision. So the idea is that all the time we deal with information such as, for example, when we go around the world, when we move in a particular place, our viewpoint changes all the time. And what I would like to know is whether we use that information, which is information that can be predicted because things don't move randomly, they move in a predictable way, and whether we use that information to anticipate the visual input that we will see. So that is the main project that I'm working on. Then I'm also measuring it using behavior, so like whether this type of information can also affect your performance in a task. And then currently I'm collaborating with another PhD student on a computational project where we have a neural network and we try to make it basically pay attention to different things and in that way solve different tasks at the same time, which is something that for neural networks is quite complicated to do.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so our next question is, how do you balance your work with your free time?
Yeah, that's a tricky question in the sense that it varies a lot from person to person. For some people, including me, like there's not so much of a boundary because like some projects I maybe will start just for fun, especially when you start to get into like computational stuff where you can just run projects by yourself, or maybe you just read some cool paper and you think, I would like to do something like this. So some things maybe don't even end up being part of my work, but just something that I did in my free time, and then maybe I will go home and I will stop thinking about something, but then I will start thinking about something else. So it's kind of always it's hard to say what is work and what is not. So yeah, but that's kind of, other people have more tried to make more of a, okay, this is, now I'm working from 9 to 5, but yeah.
As a student, did you already know what you wanted to do?
Well, I think during my bachelor's, I quite soon found that, so I started university already thinking that I wanted to do something in neuroscience research. I read one book that kind of got me into that was The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, which is a very famous book that a lot of people who got into neuroscience say, that was the book that. So it's this book by this doctor who was called Oliver Sacks, and it's basically like each chapter is a description of a clinical case that he had to deal with, and so you have patients with very specific neurological lesions that, for example, lose the ability to recognize objects. So they try to wear their wife thinking it's a hat, and or people who lose the ability to see movement or the ability to feel their own body or their memory. And that was kind of one of the things that got me interested into this topic. And then when I was but then I didn't know much about the field. And then when I was in my bachelor's, at some point I discovered that vision research was a thing, that you could measure things in vision, which looks like something very subjective and very hard to measure. And that was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. I think at some point I wanted to get into language research because I did a course in linguistics and really liked it, but then I found out about vision research and kind of that took over. Yeah.
Yes. And do you have any plans for the future? So after your PhD?
That's well, I still fortunately have some time before
Okay.
before having to decide, at least 1 year before I would like to think about it seriously. Yeah, I would like to continue research and or at least something related to research, and I would like to get more towards the computational front, so more on machine learning and AI. So, but still with a link to the brain. So, whether it's gonna be in academia or in industry, that's an open question. But yeah.
Thanks. Do you have any other questions?
No, but I just wanted to thank you for this semester.
Oh, thank you.
And
you
for
very much.
making brain workgroups very fun.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And also thank you for giving us your time for this interview.
Oh,
And I hope the viewers got some information on this field. And we'll see you in our next videos.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.